The fastest police car in the world can hit 253 miles an hour. It's a Bugatti Veyron, it belongs to the police in Dubai, and it holds an official Guinness World Record. Now meet its exact opposite. This police car makes 8 horsepower. Its top speed is 28 miles an hour. A reasonably fit person on a bicycle could, on a good day, keep up with it. And here's the strange part. Nobody made this car slow by accident. A government chose it, on purpose, to police an entire community. So before you scroll away, hit subscribe, because the reason this tiny plastic box beats every supercar cruiser ever built is going to change how you think about what a police car is actually for. Let's start with the machine itself, because you almost can't believe it's real until you've seen the numbers. The car is a Citroën Ami, and calling it a car is already being generous. Under European law, it isn't classified as a car at all. It's what's called a light quadricycle. That's a legal category that sits somewhere between a scooter and a proper automobile, and in several European countries you can drive one from the age of 14 without a full driving license. Think about that for a second. The vehicle we're talking about, the one wearing police markings, is in the same legal bracket as something a 9th grader can legally operate, and that legal category isn't a small detail. It's the key that unlocks the whole story, so it's worth understanding properly. In Europe, this class of vehicle is known as L6E. To qualify, a vehicle has to stay under strict limits. Its power is capped, its weight is capped, and critically, its top speed is capped at 45 kilometers an hour. In exchange for accepting all of those limits, the vehicle escapes an enormous amount of the cost, the regulation, and the complexity that a normal car has to carry. It doesn't need the same crash structures. It doesn't need the same expensive safety systems. It can be built cheaply, sold cheaply, and run cheaply. So when you see that 28-mile-an-hour top speed, you're not looking at a failure to go faster. You're looking at a deliberate trade. The designers gave up speed on purpose in order to gain everything else. Hold on to that idea, because it's going to come back as the whole point of this story. The specifications only make it stranger. The Ami is powered by a single electric motor rated at 6 kilowatts. In old money, that's about 8 horsepower. To put that in perspective, a lot of ride-on lawnmowers make more. It draws that power from a battery pack of just 5.5 kilowatt-hours, which is roughly the size of the battery in a couple of high-end power tools, and a tiny fraction of what a normal electric car carries. On a full charge, it'll go somewhere between 40 and 47 miles before it needs plugging back in. And when it does need charging, you don't need a special station. You plug it into an ordinary household wall socket, the same kind you'd use for a toaster, and about 3 hours later it's full. Then there's the size. The whole vehicle is about 2.4 meters long. That's under 8 feet, bumper to bumper. It weighs somewhere around 485 kilograms, which sounds like a lot until you remember that's less than half the weight of a small hatchback. The doors are so minimal that on some versions you open them by pulling on a fabric strap. The two doors don't even match each other. On one side the door is hinged at the front, and on the other it's hinged at the back, because building them identical and just flipping the same part around was cheaper than making 2 proper mirror image doors. That's the level of ruthless simplicity we're dealing with. And the top speed, the number that matters most for our story, is locked at 45 kilometers an hour. That's 28 miles an hour. Not as a suggestion, not as a limit you could sneak past on a downhill run. It is electronically capped there, and it will not go faster, no matter how hard you press the pedal. So take all of that, and now imagine it painted in police colors, with a light on top, parked outside a police station, on active duty. Your first instinct is that this has to be a joke, a publicity stunt, some marketing team's idea of a cute photo opportunity that lasted an afternoon, and then got quietly retired. And that's the assumption we need to take apart, because it's completely wrong. This car went into real service. And to understand why anyone would do that, you have to leave the world of car specifications entirely, and go to a very specific place on the map. The place is a small island called Chalki. You'll also see it spelled Halki. It sits in the Dodecanese, in the eastern Aegean Sea, about 9 kilometers west of the much larger and much more famous island of Rhodes. Chalki is tiny. We're talking about a permanent population you could fit into a single large lecture hall. In fact, when the energy project there was being set up, the whole island was counted as having only a few hundred electricity customers. It's the kind of place that most of the world has never heard of, with a small harbor, whitewashed houses climbing the hillside, and a scattering of beaches, some of which you can only reach on foot. And here is the single most important fact in this entire story. On the whole island of Chalki, the longest distance you can actually drive between 2 points is about 10 kilometers. 10. That's the entire operational world this police car has to cover. From one end of the road network to the other is a journey shorter than many people's daily commute. There are no motorways. There are no long, straight highways where a suspect could floor it and disappear over the horizon. There are narrow island lanes, winding between old stone buildings, roads that were never designed for large vehicles and can barely accommodate them. Now, the 28-mile-an-hour top speed suddenly looks very different, doesn't it? Because on Chalki, there is almost nowhere you could go faster than that even if you wanted to. A high-powered police interceptor on this island wouldn't be a crime-fighting tool. It would be a liability. It would struggle to fit down the lanes. It would be a nightmare to park. It would burn fuel that has to be shipped in, because on a small island, every drop of petrol arrives by boat. And it would spend its entire life traveling at a fraction of what it was built to do, like keeping a racehorse in a broom cupboard. The fast car isn't the practical choice here. It's the absurd one. In fact, it's worse than absurd. On lanes like these, a fast car is actively dangerous. Picture a heavy, powerful vehicle threading between stone walls, past pedestrians, past tourists wandering out of a taverna, on a road barely wider than the car itself. The capacity to accelerate hard is not a safety feature there. It's a hazard waiting for a bad moment. A vehicle that physically cannot exceed 28 miles an hour is, in that setting, the safer machine by design. Its single greatest limitation quietly turns into one of its best qualities. You cannot speed in a place where speeding would hurt someone, because the car simply won't let you. And this reframes the whole question. We started by asking how a car this slow could possibly do a police job, but that question contains a hidden assumption, the assumption that the police job is about chasing, pursuit, speed, running someone down, on an island of a few hundred people, where everyone knows everyone, where the roads dead end at the sea. That image of policing barely applies. Where exactly is the suspect going to flee to? There's no border to run for. There's no next town to vanish into. The sea is the wall around the entire prison. The actual work is presence. It's being visible. It's getting an officer from the station to a beach, or a harbor, or a hillside home, quickly enough on a 10-kilometer island, which 28 miles an hour does perfectly well. The Ami isn't a bad police car pretending to be a good one. On this terrain, it's genuinely one of the best tools for the job. The chase was never the point. If that were the whole story, it would already be a good one. A clever little vehicle, perfectly matched to an unusual place. But the reason this car actually exists, the reason it was donated and painted and put into service in the first place, is much bigger than one island's parking problems. And this is where it stops being a quirky car story and becomes something with real weight behind it. Because the police Ami on Chalki wasn't bought off a lot. It arrived, in November of 2021, as the flagship symbol of a national program with a name. The program is called GR Eco Islands, and its ambition is enormous. The Greek government's goal is to take its islands, one by one, and transform them into fully self-sustaining, green energy communities. Islands are perfect testing grounds for this, because they're self-contained. An island has clear edges. What you generate there, you can measure. What you consume there, you can track. If you can make one small island run cleanly and independently, you've built a working model you can copy across dozens, even hundreds, of others. A scientist would call it a controlled environment. A whole country's energy future is a terrifying thing to experiment on all at once. A single small island is exactly the right size to try it, learn from it, and get it wrong safely if you have to. And there's a hard economic problem hiding underneath that green ambition, which is worth spelling out, because it explains why the government cared so much. Small islands are often the most expensive places in a country to supply with power. When there's no cable running out to the island, electricity has to come from diesel generators, burning fuel that, again, arrives by boat. That's costly, it's dirty, and it's fragile, because a single supply problem can leave an entire community in trouble. So an island that can generate its own clean power from the sun sitting right above it isn't just an environmental nice-to-have. It's solving a genuine, expensive, practical headache. The green island and the cheaper island turn out to be the same island. And Chalki was chosen to go first. It became the pilot, the very first GR Eco Island, the proof of concept for the entire national vision. That's why so much landed there at once. At the heart of it is a solar farm, a photovoltaic installation rated at 1 megawatt, built to generate enough clean electricity to cover the needs of the island's residents. Around that core, the project layered in the rest of a modern, connected community. Electric vehicle chargers were installed at the port. A 5G telecommunications network was rolled out on an island most people couldn't find on a map, opening the door to things like remote schooling and telemedicine for a community that's a boat ride away from the nearest city. For an aging island population, being able to see a doctor over a video link instead of taking a ferry to Rhodes isn't a gimmick. It can be the difference between staying in your home community and having to leave it. And then there was the fleet. As part of the same push, Citroën donated 6 fully electric vehicles to the island's public authorities, not just the police, Ami. There was a second Ami, this one for the Coast Guard, which on an island nation is very often the authority that matters most, watching the water, the harbor, and the boats coming in and out. There were larger electric hatchbacks for the municipality. There was an electric minivan and an electric panel van for the island's energy community. The vehicles came on a lease arrangement lasting 4 years, after which the plan was for them to be bought back and then donated outright to the island. It's a small detail, but a telling one. The company didn't just drop the cars off for a photo and leave. The arrangement was structured so the vehicles would eventually belong to the island itself, permanently. There was even a solar-powered boat brought into the mix, built in the traditional Greek style, to handle tours and transport around the coast. The whole thing was designed as a package, a complete demonstration of what a clean island could actually look like in practice, not just on a government slide. So when you see that little police car now, you're not looking at a novelty. You're looking at the most photogenic piece of a serious energy strategy. It runs on electricity that can be generated by the island's own solar farm. It produces no emissions as it drives. It's cheap to run, cheap to charge, and perfectly sized for the roads it patrols. The police car became the mascot for an entire experiment in what a small, clean, self-sufficient community could look like. It's a symbol on wheels. And symbols matter, which is a point we're going to come back to, because it turns out the world's slowest police car has something surprising in common with the world's fastest. Now, quick pause, because if you're enjoying this, the best thing you can do is leave a comment telling me the strangest police vehicle you've ever seen in real life. I read them, and it genuinely helps the video reach more people. Okay, back to that connection between the slowest police car and the fastest, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. Let's go back to Dubai, and that Bugatti. On paper, these two vehicles could not be more different. One is a multi-million-dollar hypercar with a 16-cylinder engine and more than 1,000 horsepower, capable of speeds that would get you arrested almost anywhere on Earth. The other is an 8-horsepower plastic box that tops out slower than traffic on a busy street. One holds a Guinness World Record for being the fastest police car ever. The other is widely described as almost certainly the slowest police car in service anywhere. They sit at the absolute opposite ends of the spectrum, and Dubai's police fleet doesn't stop at one Bugatti either. It has stretched to Lamborghinis, Ferraris, a Bentley, an Aston Martin, a whole garage of the most expensive machinery on the road. And yet, ask yourself a simple question about that Bugatti. How many high-speed pursuits do you think it actually does? The answer is essentially none. No police force on Earth is running down criminals at 250 miles an hour on public roads. It would be insane. That car exists for a completely different reason. It's parked at tourist landmarks. It's photographed by visitors. It's there to project an image, to make the police feel approachable and impressive and worth walking up to. Its real job isn't pursuit. Its real job is presence. And now look back at the Ami. What is that little police car actually doing on Chalki? It's being seen. It's being photographed by tourists who can't believe how cute it is. It's making the police feel friendly and approachable and part of the community. It's projecting an image, in this case an image of a clean, modern, forward-looking island. Its real job, just like the Bugattis, isn't pursuit. It's presence. The fastest police car in the world and the slowest police car in the world are, underneath it all, doing the exact same job. They just do it at opposite ends of the speedometer. That's the irony at the heart of this whole story. We think police cars are about speed, but the two most extreme police cars on the planet prove that speed was never really the point at all. One force spent a fortune to say, look how powerful we are. The other spent almost nothing to say, look how clean and modern we are. Both messages are delivered by a car that mostly just sits there being looked at. There's one more comparison worth making, because it sharpens everything. A lot of people, when they hear the phrase slowest car, don't think of the Ami at all. They think of a different vehicle entirely. They think of the Peel P50. And the P50 is worth a moment, because the contrast with our police car is the whole lesson in miniature. The Peel P50 was a 3-wheeled microcar, built on the Isle of Man in the early 1960s. It's often called the smallest production car ever made, a title it actually holds in the record books. It was powered by a tiny engine of around 49 cubic centimeters, making somewhere in the region of 3 to 4 horsepower, with a top speed of roughly 38 miles an hour that almost nobody dared to actually attempt, because the thing was so small and so twitchy that pushing it felt genuinely dangerous. It was so minimal it didn't even have a reverse gear. If you needed to turn around, you got out, grabbed a handle, and physically dragged the back of the car around by hand. The Peel P50 is slow. But here's the difference that matters. The P50 was slow by limitation. It was slow because in the 1960s, a tiny company on a small island bolted the cheapest possible scooter engine into the lightest possible fiberglass shell and got whatever performance fell out the other end. Its slowness was a consequence of its constraints. Our police Ami is slow by decision. It could be no faster because someone, somewhere, ran the numbers and concluded that on this island, for this job, faster would be worse. One vehicle is slow because that was all they could manage. The other is slow because slow was the correct answer. And that difference, between a limitation and a choice, is the difference between a curiosity and a genuinely clever piece of design. The P50, funnily enough, is now so rare and so collectible that original examples have sold at auction for well over $100,000. The slowest car became one of the most expensive, but it got there by being an accident that survived, not a solution that worked. Once you understand that, the whole idea of ranking cars by top speed starts to feel a little bit silly, at least for a huge range of real-world jobs. We're trained to treat speed as the headline number. The first thing we ask about a car is often how fast it goes, as if that single figure tells you whether it's any good. But top speed only matters if your job actually involves going fast. And an enormous amount of the driving that happens in the world doesn't. Delivering post in a dense old town, getting around a hospital campus, moving between buildings on a big industrial site, patrolling a small island where the longest road is 10 kilometers. For all of those jobs, a car that can hit 150 miles an hour is carrying around a massive, expensive, heavy capability that will never once be used. It's answering a question nobody asked. The Ami answers a different question. Not how fast can you go, but how well does this fit the job? And when you measure it that way, it stops looking like the punchline and starts looking like the smart one in the room. It's small enough for the lanes. It's cheap enough that a small authority can actually run a fleet of them. It's clean enough to run off a solar panel. It's simple enough to charge from a wall socket. It's slow, yes, but its slowness costs it nothing, because the speed it's giving up is speed it was never going to use. Every kilogram of battery and every unit of horsepower it doesn't have is weight and cost and complexity it doesn't have to carry. The limitation is the design. And that's why this matters far beyond one small Greek island. Because Chalki was never meant to be the end of the story. It was meant to be the first chapter. The entire point of making it a pilot was to build something other places could copy. And the world is absolutely full of places that look like Chalki. Small islands with narrow roads and short distances. Old town centers where big vehicles simply don't fit. Pedestrian-heavy districts where a slow, quiet, clean vehicle is genuinely safer than a fast, loud one. Nature reserves, and campuses, and historic quarters, all over the planet, where the ability to go fast is worthless, and the ability to fit, and run cheaply, and produce no fumes, is worth everything. Greece alone has dozens of inhabited islands. If the model works on Chalki, it doesn't stay on Chalki. It spreads. For all of those places, the slowest police car in the world isn't a novelty to laugh at. It's a preview. It's a small, plastic, 28-mile-an-hour glimpse of a kind of policing and a kind of transport that's quiet, clean, cheap, and tailored precisely to the ground it actually operates on. And it turns out that when you stop assuming every vehicle needs to be built like it's about to enter a car chase, a lot of possibilities open up that we'd been ignoring, simply because we were staring at the wrong number on the spec sheet the whole time. So let's go back to where we started, and to the question that made this whole thing so strange in the first place. How can a car that can't outrun a bicycle possibly be a police car? And now you know the real answer. It can, because the job was never the chase. On an island 10 kilometers wide, powered by its own sunlight, patrolled by a silent little box that costs almost nothing to run, the fastest car money can buy would be the useless one. The slowest police car in the world isn't a failure of engineering. It's a quiet argument that we've been measuring cars by the wrong number for a very long time. Speed was the easy thing to brag about. Fit was the thing that actually mattered. And maybe that's the real record this little car holds. Not slowest police car, though it probably is that too. But the clearest proof that the smartest vehicle in any situation isn't the fastest, or the most powerful, or the most expensive. It's the one that was built, deliberately, honestly, for exactly the world it lives in. If a police force can look at a supercar and choose an 8-horsepower plastic box instead, and be completely right to do it, then it might be worth asking what other things in our lives we've been judging purely on how fast they go. If this changed the way you see that funny little car, subscribe, because the whole channel is about the stories hiding behind objects everyone else just walks past. And the next one is going to surprise you just as much as this one did.